My name is Audrey Emran Beardsley. I'm an associate professor at Arizona State University, and today I'm speaking with Dr. Sonia Nieto for Inside the Academy and the interview that we are honoring her with this year, 2015, at UMass in Amherst. So we're going to start the show and this interview off with some discussion of your personal background. This part of the show is called Becoming Sonia.
Okay.
And so we'd like to start with where you were born and your early childhood experiences.
Okay. Well, welcome to my home.
Thank you.
First of all, it's great to have you here. So I was born in Brooklyn, New York, 1943. My parents had come from Puerto Rico. My father came in 1929, and my mother came in 1934, and they met in New York and married in New York. There was a growing Puerto Rican community there, and then they settled in Brooklyn. My sister was the firstborn. I was the second, just 14 months later, and I have a brother who came 3 years after that. So we spoke only Spanish at home, and so that has been a really crucial part of my identity, I guess. No English until my sister Lydia went to school, and then she had to learn it de golpe, really quickly. She was lucky because I think that they were experimenting at the time with ESL, and they had an ESL teacher in her school, Miss Powell, who she wrote about in a poem. My sister Lydia is a poet and a writer, and I've used parts of that poem in several things that I've written. And so she was lucky that she had Miss Powell who helped her with, with English, and Lydia taught me what she could, so that I didn't go the following year. I went 2 years later because she went to kindergarten and I couldn't go to kindergarten. I started school in first grade because it would have been too difficult for my mother to go up and down 5 flights of stairs and take her to school, then take me to school, come back. Meanwhile, my brother was very young. He was a couple of years old. So I had to learn English in school in first grade, and luckily, I did, and this was way before bilingual education, which I think would have been great if I had had it, but I didn't, and so I learned English pretty quickly, which was fine, and I don't remember very much about that first year. I just remember not having words. And after that, I took off. I was a very good student. I did very well in school. And I always liked school. So I decided early on that I wanted to be a teacher. And I guess that's because teachers were the only professionals I knew. And I liked what they did, and I wanted to do that. And I knew that you had to go to college to be a teacher. So I decided when I was 10 that I wanted to go to college. I don't know exactly why I decided that, because I didn't know anybody who had gone to college. Certainly not in my immediate family. My father went to 4th grade. Well, my sister and I have a disagreement. She thinks he only went up until 3rd grade. And my mother went to sophomore year of high school. So that was pretty good in those years in Puerto Rico. And it was when I was about 10, I think, or 8, that a cousin of ours came from Puerto Rico to live with one of his older sisters, and he was the first, I believe, in the entire family who went to college. And maybe that's what influenced me. I realized a couple of years ago he had his 80th birthday, and Lydia and I went, and he was talking about that, and as he was talking about that, it occurred to me that maybe that's what had inspired me. That if he's doing it, maybe I can do it, because I really didn't know anybody else who had gone to college. So my childhood was, it was a good one. My brother has autism, and so that made it very hard for the family, because my parents really didn't have a life outside of taking care of Freddie, and they never went out, they never really did anything except work. So my mother was I used to say she was a stay-at-home mom, but not really, because my father by this time had he had a bodega, a grocery store, a Latin American grocery store. And for 20 years, from 1929 to 1949, he worked in a Jewish deli. And then the deli closed down, and a bank took its place on Delancey Street in Manhattan. And so he had saved enough to buy a little hole-in-the-wall bodega, which he bought. And my mother spent a lot of time there with my brother. And so she helped out a lot in the store, but then she'd go home and do, double duty, do all the cooking, all the cleaning, I don't know how she did it all. She didn't have a washing machine, a dryer, a dishwasher, those things were unheard of, especially for people in our situation. We were working class, and they were immigrants. And so we didn't have most of those luxuries. We didn't have a TV till I was a teenager. We didn't have a car till I turned 10. And we lived on this 5th floor walk-up. So, it was not easy, especially for my mother.
So all of the schooling was in the New York public school system, correct?
Yes, it was. Yeah, I went through public schools from the time I was 6 until I graduated from high school. And then my only foray into private school was really college, and that was St. John's University, Catholic University, where Lydia started the year before me. As you can tell, Lydia's a big part of my life.
Sure, right.
And we're only 14 months apart, so we're very close. And then so she went to St. John's, so of course I went to St. John's, and we commuted. So we took either the subway or a bus to school. And the public schools, at first we were in schools in Williamsburg, which now is very trendy in Brooklyn, but then was not at all. It was really a school for immigrant kids. The schools that we went to there. And then we moved to Fort Greene, which also is very trendy now, but was not at all trendy. And I guess our lives really changed a great deal when we moved, when I was 13, to Flatbush. And Flatbush was a more middle-class neighborhood, and we actually bought our first and only house that my family lived in. It was a small 2-family house. So I was beyond thrilled, because the thought that we could own our own home was just thrilling. And, I always say that because we changed zip codes, my life changed, and that I wouldn't be where I am today if we hadn't. And so it really shows the enormous influence of where you live and the influence that has on your education. Because I went from a ghetto junior high to a middle class junior high. And it was an excellent school. That was one of the feeder schools to Erasmus Hall High School, which was, one of the best high schools in the city. And I got an excellent education there. I had always been a good student, but it became painfully clear to me when we moved and I started in the new junior high school that there were a lot of gaps in my education up to that point.
So what about those experiences overall have influenced you as a scholar in terms of informing your research and inspiring what you do as a scholar?
Yeah, completely, because when you realize that, the unfairness of it, when I took the first test that I had ever failed was when I got to that new junior high school. And in fact, my sister, in the poem that I mentioned before, it's called I Remember, she talks about going from girls' high school to Erasmus Hall High School, because that's when we moved. I was in junior high and she was in high school. And she said, I went from smart to borderline in one day. And that just, explains it all, describes it really well, that you know, you could really be brilliant in one situation, and yet you're in another situation and you can barely keep up. And so, you know, in fact, when I went from the junior high in Fort Greene to the one in Flatbush, I came with my report card. My report card was all 97s, 98s, 95s, 93s, you know. And my homeroom teacher did something that no teacher should ever do. He passed it around for all the kids to see. And he said, "This is what a report card should look like." It was very embarrassing. I was the new kid in the class, and I just was, you know, just tormented by that. But, you know, I had been a very good student. And then I got an 18 on the first test that I took. So it really showed me that, you know, the education that I had gotten before didn't really connect with my education, so the new education. So it took me a while to catch up. And I did catch up, and I did very well. Never as well as I had done, you know, at that other school, but I did very well. And was able to get into Brooklyn College, which was very hard to do at the time. And it was practically free. But rather than go there, I decided to go to St. John's to be near my sister. And I wanted a place that wasn't as competitive. And, it, you know, there had been a lot of pressure at Erasmus Hall High School, which I really didn't like. But for which now I am forever grateful, because I got the education that helped me, you know, for my future, which I might not have gotten, probably would not have gotten, had I gone to the public school in my old neighborhood.
Sure, sure.
So all of those experiences have influenced my work a great deal. It is no accident that I focus my work on equity and diversity and social justice in education, on multicultural education, on bilingual education. I was a bilingual teacher at the first bilingual school in the Northeast, and that influenced me a great deal. I was a teacher, my first year of teaching, I was in Ocean Hill, Brownsville, which at the time was, you know, sort of a hotbed of controversy. And you know, the cry in those years was community control, because African American and Puerto Rican communities wanted to control their own schools, and so there was a lot going on. I mean, this for me was a baptism by fire. It was my first year of teaching, and then a couple years later, I went to the bilingual school, and that was another, you know, real eye-opening experience about what bilingual education could do. And those of us who weren't fortunate enough to have that experience could really tell, looking at the kids who we taught, that it was really beneficial for them.